We were sitting in a law office that smelled like lemon polish and expensive cologne. 3 days after we buried our parents, Ross, my older brother, signed document after document with a pen the lawyer kept praising. He nodded like a CEO closing a clean deal. I sat across from him, hands folded, wearing the same black coat I'd worn at the graveside. The lawyer cleared his throat and said it out loud. Slow and ceremonial, the family company valued at $950,000 was transferred in full to Ross Bexley. In full. I waited for my name to come up. It didn't. Instead, Ross slid a small brown paper bundle across the table toward me. It looked like something you'd wrap a sandwich in. Mom always said you were the spiritual one. Skylar, he said, not looking at me. This meant a lot to her. I unwrapped it. A Bible, old, cracked leather, yellowed pages, the kind you find in hotel drawers. That was my inheritance. For context, because it matters, Ross and I weren't distant cousins or half-siblings. We were raised under the same roof. I was the one who stayed, the one who fixed problems, the one who stepped in whenever the company wobbled and Ross was too busy. For 39 years. I made myself useful so he could make himself important. Ross stood, shook the lawyer's hand, and adjusted his cuff like he'd just won something fair. I smiled back. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I let him believe exactly what he wanted, that I'd swallow it, outside, in the parking lot. I opened the Bible again. An envelope slipped out and landed at my feet. My mother's handwriting stared back at me, and just like that, everything changed. Before we continue, could you tell me where you're listening from? What's the weather like where you live? And a small note, this story is partly fictional and uses artificial intelligence for the purpose of clarifying ideas and creating profound emotional impact. I hope you have a good experience. If not, feel free to leave, get some rest, and take care of yourself. Your health is more important than any story. I spent 39 years being useful, which is a polite way of saying I made myself easy to spend. When Ross stumbled, I was the one who caught him. Receipts. I corrected financial errors before auditors noticed, moved numbers back where they belonged, and explained away gaps that would have ended careers. When creditors called, they didn't ask for Ross. They asked for me. I paid debts that weren't mine because the company needed oxygen. I postponed my own plans because now isn't the time. I turned down offers, shelved ideas, and told myself stability was virtue. Ross called it loyalty. I called it maintenance. Either way, the company survived, and he looked brilliant standing on ground I kept from collapsing. I never asked for shares, not once. I didn't negotiate percentages or demand titles. I believed contribution would be remembered. That effort would compound like interest. That was my mistake. I wasn't family. I was infrastructure. You don't thank a bridge for holding. You drive across it and keep going. So when a single signature erased decades, I felt the burn without the flame. No shouting, no scene, just a tightness behind the eyes and a bitterness that tasted familiar. Ross won a company. I received silence wrapped as scripture. Later, sitting alone, I unfolded my mother's letter again. Her words were careful, almost apologetic, as if she feared waking something dangerous. One line stopped me cold and refused to let go. If something feels wrong, find the truth. I didn't go home after reading my mother's letter. I went straight to a lawyer's office recommended by an old colleague, a man who didn't smile until he understood what he was looking at. He listened without interrupting as I explained Ross's version of events. The Bible, the timing, the silence. When I finished, he said, "Let's see the will." 3 days later, I sat across from him again as he laid out 2 documents on the table. The first was dated years earlier, clear language, clean signatures, everything split 50-50 between Ross and me. "This one is solid," he said. "This is what your parents intended." I felt a brief, foolish sense of relief. Then he slid the second document forward. It was dated 18 months ago. The terms were different. Everything went to Ross. I was listed as the recipient of a meaningful personal item. To be chosen later, my stomach tightened. The lawyer tapped the page. "Your father signed this after his diagnosis," he said. "And your mother in the hospital." I answered. "Intensive care. In and out of awareness." The dates lined up too neatly. The signatures didn't. My father's handwriting, once precise, shook across the page like it was written on a moving bus. My mother's name looked thin, uncertain, unfinished. Ross had told me they changed their minds. He said it calmly, confidently, as if repetition could turn it true. Sitting there, I realized how carefully that lie had been built. Not rushed, not sloppy, designed to pass at a glance. I felt the room tilt as suspicion hardened into something colder. Every sacrifice replayed itself differently, stripped of innocence. This wasn't a misunderstanding or grief-driven confusion. It was a plan executed patiently. While I trusted silence, for the first time, I understood Ross hadn't taken everything suddenly. He'd taken it slowly over many years. The lawyer leaned back and folded his hands. His voice dropped. "Your parents didn't have the legal capacity to make this change," he said. Then he looked directly at me and added, "This isn't inheritance. This is fraud." I didn't call Ross. He called me. The phone lit up late that evening, his name sitting there like a dare. I answered on the third ring, calm enough to make him uneasy. He didn't bother with sympathy. "Don't do this. Skylar, think about the company." He said it the way people say think about the children, as if concern could erase evidence. I let him talk. Ross always revealed himself when he thought he was in control. He warned me about lawyers, about delays, about how messy things could get. Then his voice shifted, smoother, sharper. "You wouldn't last a week running it," he said. "You're good at support. That's different from leadership." I felt the anger rise and lock itself behind my ribs, dense and hot, refusing to spill. I reminded myself of the signatures, of my mother in a hospital bed, of my father's shaking hand. Pride kept my voice steady. I asked one neutral question. Ross laughed, short and dismissive, and changed tactics. He offered money, not half, not fairness. "Enough," he said. "To make this go away, be smart." He told me, "Take it and walk." The insult was almost elegant. He assumed silence was my natural state, that compliance was my character. I had spent decades absorbing his mistakes without protest, and he mistook restraint for weakness. That realization settled something in me. The fury didn't vanish. It organized itself. Ross kept talking, filling the space with threats disguised as advice. I pictured him pacing, confident that pressure would work like it always had. He still believed the story where I folded first, apologized later, and kept things running quietly in the background. That story had worked for decades. It failed now, under the weight of documents, dates, and a truth he could no longer control. When he finally paused, waiting for gratitude or surrender, I spoke. "Send me the accounting records." There was a brief silence on the line, thin and electric. Then Ross asked. What I repeated myself, slower this time, and ended the call before he could recover. That ended everything. I asked for records, not apologies. The files arrived in pieces, late at night, dumped into shared folders as if chaos could pass for transparency. I reviewed them slowly, line by line, with the lawyer beside me. Patterns emerged where excuses used to live. Transfers timed around hospital visits, small withdrawals growing larger, company expenses quietly paying personal credit cards, private travel. A life Ross never admitted was subsidized. Emails told their own story by what was missing. Threads ended abruptly. Attachments referenced but gone. Deletions clustered around the same weeks the second will appeared. Ross claimed coincidence. The numbers refused to cooperate. Money doesn't forget. It leaves fingerprints. And those fingerprints pointed in one direction every time. The calm surprised me. Anger had burned itself out and left clarity behind. Each spreadsheet returned something I thought I'd lost. Control. I wasn't chasing him anymore. The documents were doing the work. My lawyer stopped calling it a dispute and started calling it exposure. He said the words carefully, like labels on evidence bags. When we layered medical records over the transactions, the picture hardened. Funds moved while my mother was sedated. Authorizations signed while my father couldn't track a conversation. This crosses a line. The lawyer said, "You're looking at elder abuse." He didn't pause before adding, "And corporate fraud." Ross denied everything. He blamed accountants, assistants, timing. He said I was misreading intent, misunderstanding operations, inventing motives. He sent messages asking me to reconsider, then messages demanding I stop. The shift told me more than his explanations ever could. People tell the truth when pressure breaks their rhythm. I didn't respond. I forwarded files. I answered questions. I watched the process widen beyond us. When the first official notice arrived, stamped and impersonal, it felt almost gentle. An investigation had been opened. Not by me, but because the evidence required it. Power didn't return with noise. It returned with paperwork. For the first time since the funeral, I slept knowing the system, not my silence, was finally speaking for me with consequences Ross could no longer rewrite or escape. I didn't celebrate when the investigation became real. I watched. That was enough. The company began to bleed quietly at first, the way serious injuries do. A polite email from the bank arrived, then another. Credit lines were frozen pending review. Ross called it temporary. I called it gravity. Partners followed. Meetings were postponed, then canceled. One supplier pulled out until things stabilized. Another asked for guarantees Ross couldn't give. I heard his voice in those rooms through forwarded messages. Confident turning brittle. Brittle turning sharp. This is being exaggerated. He told them, "It'll blow over." It didn't. The best people left without speeches. A senior manager resigned with 2 sentences and no goodbye. A director cleared her desk before lunch. Each exit tightened the silence. The systems I'd kept running for decades now exposed what happened when leadership fed itself first. I didn't touch anything. I didn't have to. Collapse has its own momentum. Ross called. Then he called again. "Skylar. Pick up." Voicemails stacked up, changing shape by the hour. Anger first. "You did this." Bargaining next. "We can fix it." Then panic. "The bank won't release funds." I listened once, long enough to hear fear punch through his control. It felt like standing behind glass. I answered emails from counsel. I signed nothing. I forwarded notices to the right addresses and let timelines do their work. There is a strange relief in precision. When every action is documented, cruelty becomes unnecessary. The irony didn't escape me. The company survived on my restraint. It was now unraveling because of his excess. By the end of the week, Ross's number filled my screen like a countdown. 10 calls, 20, 30. I stopped listening. I started counting. Each ring marked another consequence arriving on schedule. Control doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. And as the phone kept lighting up, unanswered, I realized silence had finally become mine to use. I let it ring, knowing every unanswered call rewrote the balance between us, and that the company's pain was simply the truth catching up at last, without mercy or negotiation anymore now. I finally answered on the 42nd call. Ross didn't start with anger this time. He started with breathless relief, as if my voice alone had stabilized something. "Thank God," he said. "I've been trying to reach you." I let the silence stretch until it hurt. Then the excuses came. The investigation was unfair. Advisors had panicked. Banks were overreacting. "This isn't my fault." "Skylar," he said, "you know how these things spiral." His voice cracked on the word spiral, and I heard something new underneath it. Fear, raw and undiluted. He blamed timing. He blamed employees who had already resigned. He blamed the market, the lawyers, the stress of losing our parents. He even blamed me, softly. "If you'd just talked to me first," he said, "none of this would have happened." I closed my eyes and felt 39 years compress into a single, tight pulse. Then he offered money. Not justice, not truth. Money. "I'll give you a portion," he said quickly. Afraid I'd interrupt. "Enough to make this right. We don't need to involve anyone else." The word portion landed exactly where he intended. Small, contained, controlled. I almost laughed. His voice began to fray. Confidence drained out, sentence by sentence. "Please," he said. And that word shattered something in him. Ross Bexley, who never apologized, who never bent, was begging me to save him from the consequences he'd engineered. I felt the anger surge at last. Not wild, but clean. Power had shifted, and he felt it before I said a word. I let him talk himself empty. When he finally stopped, waiting for mercy, I spoke once. 55%, I said. And a confession. He inhaled sharply. "What you admit what you did." I continued, steady and precise, in writing, to everyone it matters to. Or we let this finish. The line went silent, and for the first time, I knew he understood exactly who was in control. I ended the call, knowing the begging had only begun, and that this moment marked the point where mercy stopped and accountability finally took over for him completely now. I didn't attend the signing in person. Distance made it cleaner. Ross sat in a conference room with lawyers on both sides, cameras off, voice thin. He read the confession twice before signing, as if repetition might soften it. It didn't. The document stated facts, not feelings, fraud, manipulation, abuse of authority. Each word landed without drama, which made it worse for him. When he finished, no one congratulated him. There was nothing to celebrate. The papers moved fast after that. Copies went to banks, partners, family members who had believed his version for years. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. The truth didn't need my tone to carry it anymore. The family call was brief and brutal. Ross spoke first, stumbling through apologies that arrived years too late. Someone asked how long it had been happening. Someone else asked why. He had no answer that survived silence. What he'd built as confidence collapsed into something small and exposed. I watched faces change as understanding replaced loyalty. Business followed blood. Partners withdrew, not loudly, but decisively. Deals dissolved. Contracts were reassigned or canceled outright. The company didn't explode, it drained. Assets were sold to cover obligations. His name became a liability, something legal teams underlined in red. No one wanted proximity to a man who signed lies. Ross sent one last message, short and careful. He said he hoped I was satisfied. I didn't reply. Satisfaction implies pleasure. This wasn't that. It was resolution, cold, proportional, unavoidable, when everything was done. I went home and placed the Bible on my table. I hadn't opened it since the parking lot. It wasn't leverage or symbolism to me anymore. It was evidence, proof that truth can hide in places dismissed as useless. I kept it, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Ross lost a company. I kept the thing that started the end of his lies. And I understood that justice doesn't shout. It settles, quietly, and leaves nothing left to argue. That silence, earned honestly, felt heavier than applause and final, because nothing remained hidden anymore at last now. After the noise faded, quiet settled in like something earned. I opened the Bible again, not with anger this time, but with curiosity. Tucked near the back was my father's handwriting, small and deliberate, a list he had started years before his hands betrayed him. At the top, one line stood alone, Skylar's integrity. No explanation, no conditions, just that. For years. Ross believed value was measured by what bent when he leaned on it. Titles, accounts, people. I believed value survived pressure. The difference felt academic until everything collapsed. Now it felt final. He chased control and lost it. I stepped back and let structure do its work. I invested my share quietly. Index funds, audited accounts, boring decisions that aged well. I asked questions. I signed clean documents. I slept. There was no rush to prove anything. Wealth that arrives honestly doesn't demand performance. It just sits there. Patient. People asked if I planned to go after Ross personally, if I wanted an apology, or revenge, or a public reckoning. I told them no. Systems punish better than people ever could. I didn't need his regret. I needed the record corrected. That had already happened, some nights. The irony still made me smile. He dismissed the Bible as sentimental clutter. It dismantled his empire more effectively than any threat I could have made. He thought power lived in ownership. He never considered it might live in restraint. Before closing the book, I read one passage my father had underlined long ago. A line that landed with surgical timing: better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. I closed the cover and set it back on the shelf, knowing at last what it was worth, and why it was given to me instead of everything else. It reminded me that silence can be chosen, not enforced, and that dignity compounds when left untouched. Ross lost noise and illusion. I kept time, balance, and the patience to let truth finish speaking long after everyone else stopped listening. That was the inheritance that never depreciated or required permission. I didn't announce the end. I simply stopped responding. Ross Bexley disappeared from my life the way noise does when a door finally closes. No speeches, no warnings. I blocked the number, forwarded nothing, and let distance finish what the law had started. Life didn't become dramatic after that. It became quiet. I woke up without bracing myself. I made plans without calculating who they protected. The company, the conflict, the endless explanations, all of it receded. I felt no urge to revisit the damage or extract apologies. Closure doesn't need witnesses. People expected bitterness. They asked if I missed my brother. I answered honestly I missed the idea of him. The man himself had made his choices long before I made mine. Cutting contact wasn't punishment. It was alignment. Some nights, I still hear his voice in memory, insisting, "You're overreacting." I smile at that now. Truth doesn't react, it stands. I wasn't given nothing. I was given the truth. Justice didn't come from revenge, it came from refusing to stay silent. And once silence became mine to choose, not endure. The weight lifted. What remained wasn't triumph. It was peace, earned slowly, without spectacle, and finally, complete at last. There's a lesson hiding beneath all the paperwork, signatures, and silence in this story. And it has nothing to do with money. It's about how easily loyalty turns invisible when people get used to your sacrifice. I learned that doing the right thing quietly doesn't protect you from being erased. It only makes it easier for others to pretend your effort was automatic, not chosen. What saved me wasn't anger or revenge. It was paying attention the moment something felt wrong and refusing to talk myself out of that feeling. Many people sense injustice early but dismiss it because they don't want conflict, or because they're afraid of looking selfish. The truth is, standing up for yourself doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. Systems only correct themselves when someone stops absorbing the damage for everyone else. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you ask the uncomfortable question that changes everything? I hope this story reminds you that dignity isn't loud, and courage doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just choosing not to step back one more time. Before you go, tell me, where are you listening from right now? Your comment helps this story reach people who might need it more than they realize. And if you feel this message matters, subscribing, liking, or sharing isn't just support for this channel. One simple action from you can help someone else recognize their worth, question an unfair situation, or find the strength to speak up. Sometimes, that's how real change starts. This story was fully created and produced by our team. We do not copy or borrow content from any other channel. Thank you for staying with us and listening until the end.